What are your thoughts on a company that grows fast, but with its recurring revenue making up only 10% of its entire sales? Thank you very much.
I would say it very much depends on what kind of industry we're talking about. So I'll give an example. I have a company I really like in the home building space. And if you think about that industry, what the home builders do is they buy the land and they develop on it, they build a house on it, and then they sell it to somebody. And then it's like wipe your hands clean and move on to the next customer. So there's not much of recurring revenue in that sense, but it's not something that worries me because I understand that the demand for homes is really high. It's been very high historically for a very long time. And new customers are not very hard to find, especially these days. So it's not a thing that would concern me that they don't get much recurring revenue. On the flip side, you have a company like Microsoft, which I've been long, it was the first stock I ever bought and recently bought more of it. They have a ton of recurring revenue, which is very, very nice because it's almost like every year their revenue's at a floor. They add more customers and it's like we're at a new floor. And then you add more customers, we're at a new floor. You raise prices, we're at a new floor. So it makes their revenues very reliable. And that's why you do see it tends to get a higher price in the stock market, a higher valuation compared to its earnings. So obviously I like both situations. And that's where I say it really depends on the business model. Because if I were to see Microsoft and they had their recurring revenue start to decline, that would be something to look at and potentially be a bad signal. Whereas, with a home builder, we don't care about recurring. So that's why I say you really have to know, okay, what are these machines? How does that fit in with their customers? How is this serving their customers? Why are they buying these machines? How often do they buy them? These are all things that, again, if you read the 10K, you should get a lot of insight into some of these ideas. And then also having that industry experience from being a worker there, that's, I'm sure, going to help immensely too.
Yeah, those are all great insights. And I think the idea of recurring revenue is obviously a great idea. But I guess the blunt fact of the matter is not every business model will allow that. And depending on what it is, you think about, home builders is a great example. Cars, think about cars. Our favorite company, Tesla, has gone to the moon based on the idea that it's not a recurring model. It's you buy a car and you don't buy another car for, I'm not sure what the average rate is. I guess 5 or 6 years, just for giggles. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but nobody worries about whether they're going to find the demand for other people to step in and buy a new car, and whether it's Tesla or whether it's Honda or whether it's Ford. And so that business model, kind of the same idea. There's a never-ending flow of people that are going to want to buy a car, or you could call that a TAM, a total addressable market. There's a very big TAM for auto industry or for electric vehicles in particular right now. Same thing with homes. And look at the demand of homes right now. Pulte and all the companies that are associated with building homes, they aren't too worried about whether there's going to be other people lining up to buy one after they sell the one they have in front of them. So it really goes back to, like Andrew was saying, understanding the industry that they're in and whether there is going to be a recurring demand for that product down the road. If it's you buy this one time and it only lasts for 30 years and there's 150 people available that would want to buy it, well then yeah, that's going to be something of a concern. But if it's something that has to be replaced on a somewhat regular basis or upgraded because of technology improving, there's all kinds of things that you need to take into consideration when you think about that. And reoccurring revenue is not always the panacea that it's made out to be by market analysts. Sometimes there are higher costs associated with recurring revenues, and that may be a shock to people, but sometimes the cost to acquire a customer is quite expensive. And if you have high churn, in other words, if somebody signs up for Netflix and they're only on the service for 6 weeks and then they churn off, they unsubscribe because they wanted to watch Squid Game and it's over and now they want to watch, they don't really have any interest, then Netflix has to go back and spend more marketing money to acquire that customer to come back on the platform. And so that's why when you talk about companies that have recurring revenue, sometimes the cost to acquire those customers can be very expensive and it can really eat into the margins. And sometimes you'll notice that companies that have more one-time charge kinds of opportunities may have better margins than companies that are recurring revenues because of those costs that are required to acquire the customer. So it's not always a panacea that every company is going to have recurring revenue, because some just aren't, and they may, or it may be a smaller portion of their business. So it goes back to figuring out what it is that they sell, who can they sell it to, and how much can they sell it for, and how long can that continue to go on. And like Andrew said, if you have inside knowledge of that industry, then you're light years ahead of me looking at a company like InMode right now, because you're in it. You know what's going on, you know how they operate, and you may even be using their product. And if you are, then that just gives you even more insight. So I think that's a great question to ask, but it really comes back to, I think, understanding the business model and what separates it from its competitors.
If you want an example of a recurring model that hasn't worked out so well lately, just look at the cable industry. We all know how that monthly cable bill has been so annoying. And finally, people just got sick of it. And those companies have been struggling really, really badly. And so it does come down to, that's the industry. If you understand the industry, if you're a cable customer, you understand the industry and you understand the alternatives. And it's been a very tough period for those companies because they haven't been able to keep customers on that recurring model. There's been a ton of churn.